Have you ever found yourself in a situation that you never thought would happen to you? Something that, in the blink of an eye, could turn your whole world upside down. Well, let me tell you about a moment in my life that almost ruined everything I held dear. But the crazy part, it didn't end the way you'd expect. So, there I was, sitting in the kitchen sipping my coffee, minding my own business. It was just supposed to be a normal day. My sister, the one who's always running errands and never seems to have time to relax, had left for groceries. She had asked me if I wanted to come along, but I wasn't in the mood for a trip. You know how it is. Sometimes you just want a little peace and quiet. As soon as she left, it felt like the calm I had been waiting for. But what I didn't expect was that it would lead to something I regret. My sister's husband, Jason, had been in the living room for the past hour watching some random sports game on TV. He was the type of guy who'd usually zone out during the day, barely paying attention to anything else going on around him. At least that's what I thought. But there was something different about that day. Something about the way he looked at me when I passed by. Maybe it was the way he smiled at me a little too long, or how our eyes lingered just a second longer than usual. Honestly, I had brushed it off at first, telling myself I was overthinking. After all, we were family. But still something felt off. I didn't think much of it at first. You know how it is, you're just sitting there trying to get through the day, and someone says something or does something that makes you feel a little too comfortable. Jason, out of nowhere, invited me to join him on the couch. Normally I would have refused, but that particular day I didn't. "Come on, sit with me for a bit. The game's about to get exciting," he said casually, patting the seat next to him. I don't know what happened. Maybe it was the silence of the house or the fact that I was used to seeing him in such a casual, distant way. But I sat down next to him. The atmosphere instantly felt different. He was closer than usual, his leg just brushing against mine. There was no real reason for it, but the space between us seemed to shrink, and suddenly the air felt thick, like something was hanging over both of us. Then, out of nowhere, Jason did something unexpected. He put his arm around me. At first, I thought it was just to be playful, like how you would with a sibling or a close friend, but it wasn't playful. It was more intimate, and that's when my heart started to race. I had to pull myself back from the moment, telling myself that it was just a lapse in judgment. But as I sat there, I couldn't help but feel something was changing. The lines between what was normal and what wasn't started blurring, and I didn't know how to stop it. Jason, noticing my hesitation, gave a small chuckle and pulled away a little, as if realizing he had crossed a line. But in his eyes there was a glimmer of something that felt like he was testing the waters, trying to see just how far he could push it. I wasn't sure where this was going. I couldn't let myself think it was anything serious. Could I? Then, out of nowhere, the front door opened. My sister was back. I froze, barely able to breathe, as Jason and I looked at each other in silence. What had just happened? What was happening? My sister walked in, bags of groceries in hand, completely unaware of the tension in the room. I quickly stood up, trying to shake off the strange feeling that had settled in my chest. Jason, however, didn't move, staying seated as if nothing had just occurred between us. It was like everything went back to normal in an instant. But for me, nothing was normal anymore. "Hey, you guys look cozy," my sister said, grinning as she set the bags down. She glanced at me, raising an eyebrow. "What's going on?" I stammered, trying to come up with some casual response. "Nothing, just watching the game." Jason chuckled softly, clearly relieved to have the attention shifted away from us. "Yeah, nothing more than that," he added, his voice a little too smooth, too casual. But deep down I could feel a knot tightening in my stomach. What was that? That wasn't just friendly banter. Not the kind I was used to. And as much as I tried to convince myself otherwise, something had shifted. Something had crossed the line. As my sister unpacked the groceries and started putting things away in the kitchen, I sat back down on the couch, trying to distance myself from what had just happened. But I couldn't shake the feeling that Jason was still watching me. Every now and then, I'd catch him glancing over at me from the corner of his eye, and each time, it felt like the room got just a little bit smaller. The tension was unbearable. I wasn't sure if he was aware of how awkward things were now, or if he was just pretending to ignore it. My mind raced. What if my sister noticed something? What if she could tell? I had to get out of there, but I couldn't just leave. I had to act like everything was fine. And so I did. I played the part, pretending like nothing had changed. But Jason wasn't pretending. His eyes followed me when I walked past him, and he spoke to me in a tone that sent chills down my spine. "You okay?" he asked softly, as if no one else could hear. His voice was low, just above a whisper, and there was something in it that I couldn't ignore. It wasn't concern. It wasn't sympathy. It was something else, something more dangerous. I froze for a moment, unsure of how to respond, but then I did what I always did when caught in an uncomfortable situation. I smiled. Just a little one, nothing too obvious, and tried to act like everything was fine. "Yeah, I'm fine," I said, hoping my voice didn't sound as shaky as I felt. "Just tired. I think I'll head home soon." Jason nodded, but there was no mistaking the look in his eyes. He wasn't letting go of whatever had just happened between us. I could feel it in the air, thick and heavy, like it was waiting to explode. As the evening went on, I thought I could let it go. My sister and Jason went about their evening routine, chatting, laughing, the usual. But the moment I had almost crossed that line was still gnawing at me. I couldn't stop thinking about it. The way his arm had brushed against mine, the way his eyes lingered just a little too long. What did he want from me? The more I thought about it, the more I realized that I wasn't the only one struggling with what had happened. Jason seemed distant now, like he was caught between his usual calm demeanor and something else that was bubbling just beneath the surface. Every time he looked at me, it felt like he was trying to figure me out. Then, as the night wound down and my sister started talking about going to bed, Jason got up and made his way to the kitchen. I thought I could finally breathe easy, but just as I was about to follow my sister to the bedroom, Jason stopped me. "Hey," he said, his voice low again, almost like he was hesitant. "Can we talk for a second?" I froze again. What was this? I had no idea what he wanted, but I knew that whatever it wasn't good. I started to say something, but Jason cut me off before I could finish. I don't want things to be weird between us," he said, looking at me like he was trying to read me. "You're my wife's sister, and I don't want you to think I'm some creep or anything." But there was something in his words that felt off. Why was he so concerned about what I thought? Was it guilt? Was it guilt over what had almost happened between us? I took a deep breath, trying to calm the nerves that were threatening to break through. "It's fine," I replied quickly, though I could feel my voice tremble slightly. "Everything's fine. Let's forget about it." But as I walked away, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. And just as I thought I could escape the tension, Jason followed me. My heart raced as I heard his footsteps behind me. What was he going to do next? What was he really trying to say? I could feel Jason's presence behind me, his footsteps echoing in the hallway as I quickened my pace, not knowing where I was trying to go. I was caught between wanting to get away from him and some irrational part of me that was curious about what he wanted to say. I was trying to convince myself that everything would be okay, but the closer he got, the more my nerves jangled. I could hear his breath growing closer, and it sent a shiver down my spine. "Wait," Jason called out softly, his voice carrying just enough urgency to make me hesitate. My heart thumped in my chest, thudding in my ears as I turned around, not sure what to expect. He was standing just a few feet away, his face a mix of concern and something else, something darker. "I just need you to know that wasn't supposed to happen," he said quietly, as if trying to explain himself. But his words didn't make me feel better. Instead, they made my anxiety spike. "Your family. I don't want to cross that line." But I could see it in his eyes. He was trying to convince himself just as much as he was trying to convince me. The lines he was talking about weren't as clear as he wanted them to be. The way he'd looked at me earlier, the way his touch lingered. I could feel it now, the temptation in the air. We were teetering on the edge of something, and the more he tried to downplay it, the harder it was for me to ignore. "Jason, stop," I said, my voice trembling more than I wanted it to. "It's fine. We can forget it happened." But the tension between us only grew. He stepped forward, and at that moment I didn't know what would happen next. Was he going to try again? Was he really going to push me into something I knew was wrong but couldn't help feeling drawn to? "I can't just forget it," Jason said, his voice almost a whisper, so low that I had to lean in to catch his words. "It's not that simple. I've been feeling this way for a while now." He paused, his eyes locking onto mine. There was no escaping the intensity in his gaze. My chest tightened as he continued. "I don't know what it is about you, but when you're around I just feel something. Something I shouldn't feel. Everything in me told me to walk away, to put some space between us, to leave it behind. But I couldn't move." There was something about the way he said it, like he wasn't just confessing but also testing me, waiting for me to respond. My heart raced faster than it should have, and for a brief second, I was lost in the vulnerability of the moment. "Jason, this isn't us," I said, my voice shaky but firm. It can't happen. We're family." He was quiet for a moment, just looking at me like he was processing what I said. His expression shifted, but not in the way I expected. There was no guilt, no shame. It was as if he was looking at me for some sort of validation, like he wanted me to acknowledge that what was happening between us was somehow inevitable. "Maybe it should happen," he murmured, stepping even closer, his body barely a breath away from mine. I backed up instinctively, my heart hammering against my chest, but I couldn't escape the way his words made me feel, the way his presence consumed the space between us, filling the silence with a tension that was almost impossible to ignore. "I don't want to hurt anyone," he added, his voice quieter now, almost a whisper, like he was trying to convince both of us. "But I don't know how to fight it anymore." The air between us felt charged, and for a moment I was paralyzed by the thought that this might actually happen, that we might cross that line and there would be no turning back. Everything inside me screamed at me to stop, to pull away, but my feet wouldn't move. My heart was racing in a way I couldn't control, and every instinct told me this was a dangerous path to take. "Jason," I said again, my voice breaking as I tried to steady myself. "This is wrong. We can't do this." And yet, as the words left my mouth, I could feel something else in the back of my mind, like a whisper. What if I didn't stop him? What if this was just the moment when everything changed? Was it really that wrong? Wasn't it just a slip? It wouldn't hurt anyone, would it? But before I could even begin to process what I was thinking, I heard my sister's voice from the other room. "Hey, what's going on out there?" The sound of her calling out was enough to snap both of us back into reality. Jason's expression faltered, his posture stiffening as he stepped back. It was like he was suddenly aware of the situation again, the weight of it all crashing down on him. He exhaled deeply, his shoulders sagging as if the moment had passed. He started, but he didn't finish. Instead, he just nodded. "We'll talk later." Without waiting for me to respond, Jason turned and walked away, heading back toward the living room where my sister was, like nothing had just happened, like none of the emotions swirling between us had ever existed. I stood there frozen for what felt like an eternity, trying to understand everything that had just transpired. But as I heard my sister call out again, asking what was taking so long, I finally found the strength to move. I didn't know what to think, and I definitely didn't know what was going to happen next, but I knew one thing for sure. Whatever had almost happened between Jason and me wasn't just going to disappear. It would haunt me. It would haunt us both. But just as I thought it was over, Jason pulled me aside once more. The look on his face was different this time, more determined. Was he going to try again? Was this something I couldn't escape? I didn't know what to think when Jason pulled me aside again. It felt like a scene out of a dream I couldn't wake up from. The room felt colder now, like the tension had thickened and settled in the air between us. I stood frozen in the hallway, watching him move toward me. His eyes dark and serious, not like the playful gaze he'd had earlier in the day. This was different. This was something else. Listen, I'm sorry, Jason started, his voice tight, his hands clenched at his sides. I didn't mean for any of this to happen, but it's been eating at me all night, and I need to get it out. I swallowed hard, my heart pounding in my chest. I wanted to stop him, to tell him that we had to forget everything that had almost happened, but the words wouldn't come. His proximity was too much, and everything inside me screamed to get away before this went any further. But for some reason I stayed. Something about the way he was standing there, vulnerable and raw, made me hesitate. His usual calm demeanor was gone, replaced by this urgency that felt impossible to ignore. It felt like he was on the edge of something he couldn't control, and I was standing right there, the only person who could stop him from falling off. I need you to understand something, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't want to mess everything up. I don't want to hurt you. I've been feeling this way for so long, and it's been eating me up inside. I can't keep pretending like nothing's happening. For a moment I just stared at him, trying to make sense of what he was saying. This wasn't just some fleeting attraction. This wasn't just a one-time slip. This had been building for God knows how long, and now that it was out in the open, it felt like there was no going back. I wanted to tell him to stop, to push him away, but somehow I couldn't. Every part of me screamed that this was wrong, that I had to leave before it was too late. But the rest of me, it was frozen, confused, torn. I don't know how to stop it, Jason said, his eyes searching mine, desperate. I don't know how to pretend anymore. I don't know how to just walk away from this. From you. The way he said it, like I was the only thing keeping him from falling apart, hit me harder than I cared to admit. For a moment I felt a rush of emotions, a mix of guilt, confusion, and something else that I couldn't quite name. This wasn't just about some random attraction. It was deeper than that. This was something that could ruin lives. But then, in a split second, the clarity I had been missing rushed back to me. My sister, his wife, the woman I loved and respected. What would happen if she found out? What would happen to our family, to our trust, if we let this go any further? Couldn't do it. I couldn't let myself fall for this. I stepped back, shaking my head. Jason, stop. Please. This is wrong. You're my sister's husband. Can't do this. I can't let this go any further. His face fell, his eyes darkening with a mix of frustration and something else. Hurt? Regret? I couldn't tell. But I knew one thing for sure. I had made the right choice. I'm sorry, I whispered, my voice cracking as I turned and walked away, back toward my sister and the safety of normalcy. I had no idea what Jason would do or how this would affect our relationship moving forward, but I knew that I had to get out of there before it was too late. As I passed the living room, Jason didn't stop me. He didn't try to grab my arm or pull me back. He just stood there, silent, watching me as I disappeared into the hallway. When I reached the bedroom, I locked the door behind me and leaned against it, my heart racing, my breath shallow. The weight of what had almost happened felt suffocating, like I was carrying something I shouldn't be carrying. And yet, despite all the guilt and shame I felt, I couldn't shake the thought that maybe, just maybe, something between us would never fully go away. The next morning, everything was back to normal. My sister was laughing at some random joke on the TV, oblivious to the storm that had nearly torn through our lives the night before. But every time I looked at Jason, I saw something different. There was a tension between us now. Something unspoken that hung in the air. And the worst part, I knew it wouldn't just go away. The feelings, the confusion, the temptation, they were still there. And I had no idea how to deal with them. But for now, I would keep pretending that everything was fine. That nothing had happened. That we hadn't almost crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. But deep down, I knew it wasn't over. Not by a long shot.